I don't know about you, but the seemingly normal serial killer is the one type of criminal that truly frightens me, like the Lucy Leppys of the world. She's the hardworking, unassuming nurse who covertly murdered a number of babies that she was supposed to care for. To this day, friends and some relatives refuse to believe that Lucy was capable of committing such crimes, even though the evidence is indisputable. And who could blame them for being in denial? I mean, when you think of a serial killer, what comes to mind? I'm thinking middle-aged, white male, socially awkward, reclusive, maybe a little mad at the world. Well, meet Willy Suarez Maceo. He's an attractive, fit, well-dressed 25-year-old realtor from Miami and the CEO of a budding fashion line. He's also an alleged serial killer.
Willy Maceo faces charges of first-degree murder and attempted premeditated murder after police say he targeted several homeless people. CBS 4's Bobeth Yates spoke with one of his neighbors who was still shocked by this arrest.
He looked like an upstanding person in the community, and it turned out not to be the case. It's terrifying. I think it's terrifying. And there, but for the grace of God, go I. You know, any one of us can fall victim to a serial killer.
Although Maceo crafted a nearly perfect perception of himself on social media platforms, his personal life wasn't nearly as polished. According to thedailybeast.com, a few years prior to the latest events in his life, the Cuban-born man had struggled with bipolar disorder and refused to take his meds, which pushed his parents to seek 911 for assistance. Apparently, he had been ranting about conspiracy theories and racking the slide of his Glock, the parents said, prompting cops to place Maceo under an involuntary psychiatric hold. Authorities seized Maceo's gun, but were obligated to return it within 72 hours of his release from the hospital. Now, the following is all conjecture, but I do think that you can tell a lot about a person just by looking into their eyes. We've all heard the Shakespeare quote about the eyes being the window to the soul, and if that is the case, then Willy Suarez Maceo doesn't actually have one. Despite the fact that he's obviously photogenic, something in these pics are amiss. His eyes are vacant. It's as if he's performing normalcy, which is common among serial killers. Like all serial killers, Maceo reportedly targeted one of the most vulnerable groups in society, the homeless. If that wasn't bad enough, all of his victims were sleeping at the time that he carried out acts of violence against them. On October 16th, he was captured on surveillance, parking his car within the vicinity of 59-year-old Manuel Perez, who was later stabbed to death. There's no footage of the actual murder, but Maceo can very clearly be seen fleeing the area. December 21st rolls around, and the realtor by day and killer by night is supposedly at it again. This time, his weapon of choice is a gun, a 9mm. He shoots his homeless male victim in the head, but by the grace of God, or some other higher power, the unidentified man survives. Unfortunately, the next casualty wouldn't be so lucky. Just 2 hours after attempting to murder one homeless man, Willy sets his sight on 56-year-old Jerome Antonio Price, who is sleeping on the pavement in the Wynwood Design District. Jerome, also known as Jerry, among his family and friends, was a troubled man. He suffered with an addiction to alcohol for 3 decades, which sadly led him to a life on the streets. Even though his family, namely his younger brother Terrence, offered to help over the years, he always returned to his very high-risk lifestyle.
The family of Jerome Price have not been in contact with him since November. On Friday, they were watching the news and they realized that he was murdered. But the way in which he was murdered and the video, it is very disturbing. And today, this family is talking about it.
Watching the fire come from the muzzle was difficult to watch. He was in a fetal position.
What would you say to the suspect in this case?
That you're a coward and we're going to get justice.
Terrence had a lot more to say when he attended the annual Homeless Persons Memorial Candlelight Vigil, December 16, 2022, in Miami. According to the Miami Times, it's a national effort to raise awareness about the tragedy of homelessness and promote advocacy. Terrence said the following as he stood beside his wife, Austria, his sister Maria, and her husband Andrew. "I'm here with family to celebrate with you the life of our loved ones we've lost as they were living the harsh reality of homelessness. My hope for all the families is that the National Homeless Day Memorial Service will be a beacon of light to commemorate those who meant so much to us. May you find comfort in knowing that your loved one's life was precious and meant something." Aside from his face appearing in the CCTV footage just moments after one murder, it was the partial license plates that authorities ran that sealed the deal. And on Christmas Eve, the day of his arrest, he was actually carrying a Glock, and the shell casings matched those of both crime scenes. This seems like an open and shut case, but in spite of the overwhelming evidence, Maceo's court-appointed attorney, Kendall Rinko, asserts that Maceo is innocent because he can't actually be seen committing any of the crimes he's been accused of. It's an extremely weak defense, if you ask me. The case is ongoing, and here's hoping that Terrence and his family get justice.
To me, it's no surprise that you would see somebody out there who is exerting violence on the homeless, given that the city has created this climate of dehumanization. The very first thing the city must do is stop the demagoguery, stop dehumanizing people who are victims of poverty and who are vulnerable to this type of violence on a daily basis.
Final thoughts. It's easy to forget that homeless people are people too. Let's face it, some of them are belligerent because of unaddressed mental health issues or because they're under the influence. Sometimes they smell because they're unable to maintain proper hygiene, or they've given up altogether. The reality is that the average person sees them as a nuisance, a bunch of nameless people whose gaze you avoid at all costs. And that's probably why Maceo chose that particular group to terrorize. I found this case especially disturbing because anyone could wind up in a homeless person's situation, and the thought of possibly being subjected to that level of sadism, all because your basic needs aren't met, is heartbreaking.